Hello, folks. Welcome to the Investitute podcast and vlog. That's, of course, our video blog. It is the day that we had been waiting for. It is May 8th, and testimony by ousted FBI Chief James Comey going on right now. Now, this had been talked about for a long time. In fact, so long, and the setup has been so big for this particular event that they were opening bars early in Washington, D.C., and in Chicago, and in San Francisco. Why? Because people wanted to watch this. This was going to be the day that they hung Donald Trump. But then yesterday, Mr. Comey sent out a list of his opening statement. And in that opening statement, he pretty much slammed everything that the left had been hoping for. He said that indeed, he did tell President Trump on 3 separate occasions, "You, sir, are not the subject of our investigation into tampering by the Russians." Wow, that was like something that every lefty had been hoping and praying he wouldn't say. They were all hoping for, oh, there are definitely ties to Trump and the Russians, but there are not. And so Mr. Comey actually said to Mr. Trump, and now in open testimony, sworn testimony, that he made that expression to the President of the United States 3 separate times. You are not under investigation. You are not the subject of this investigation, and so forth. So that took a lot of air out of what was going to be the Super Bowl of congressional testimony. Think of the worst Super Bowl game you ever saw. This is that going on right now. Why do I say that? Well, yeah, everybody's still all cranked up about, oh, we're going to get in there and see if the left can get any punches in, and if the right defends Trump or this or that. Right doesn't even have to defend Trump here, folks. Comey's doing it for him. So how do I know that the market doesn't care and doesn't think this is a huge negative? Well, let's take a look at the VIX. My brother Pete and I were talking as he was getting ready for the halftime report show on CNBC that airs from noon until 1 Eastern time. It's very likely that the whole show will be wiped out today, or that they'll maybe get in a couple minutes, because whenever you start something like this and every senator wants their time in front of the camera because, you know, this is their one opportunity to maybe make some points or something like that and get in front of their constituents for free. They're not having to pay for it. Well, what we're looking at is the VIX falling. The VIX has dropped. In fact, it broke 10 today. Now, it's just over 10 at mid-session, but it broke 10, trading to 984 today. It was at one point down 5%. Gold, a safe haven, right? So how did that trade work out? Well, as soon as that stuff started coming out from James Comey last night about his opening remarks, well, gold started doing this, started rolling over. Today, it's down 1%. So we're looking around. We're watching the VIX, VIX. We're watching the VXN. We're watching the Spider. We're watching the IWM. We're looking around for big bets placed to the upside or to the downside. Not seeing much of that based on this testimony. As Andrew would say, it looks like a big nothing burger. And I would say even worse than that, it looks like one of the worst Super Bowls that you can remember. You know, whether it was a blowout Super Bowl like when my Bears beat the Patriots back in '85, it kind of feels like that. Like all the air was sucked out of the room with Mr. Comey pre-releasing his statement yesterday evening. And then CNN even had to apologize because they had allegedly an anonymous source, of course, that had told them off the record that Mr. Comey would refute that he had told Mr. Trump that 3 times. Well, it turns out now that Comey gave a Columbia law professor, he leaked himself, Comey, to this law professor, some information that he hoped the Columbia law professor would put out to the media. He did. He put it out to the New York Times. But I don't know how accurate it was, because a lot of the folks, CNN and ABC, have already had to post retractions of their stories, corrections to those stories. Folks, if it bleeds, it leads. They were hoping this was going to be some big bloody thing, sort of like Kathy Griffin, but it wasn't, and it isn't. And maybe that means that we can get on with the president's agenda. Maybe that means we can concentrate a little more on important things like reforming taxes, fixing the Affordable Care Act, whether it's repeal and replace or whether it's actually fixing that act. We need to do that. And then how about that $1 trillion infrastructure bill? These are things that will move the market. This testimony, something that is just gone, nothing happened. But we do have a couple stocks to talk about today. Take a look at Visa, symbol V. Visa, upside call buying 2 weeks out. It's the, I believe, 21st of January expiration calls that they're actively buying in Visa. At least it's 2 weeks out and it's at the 96 strike. Also, INFN, some big upside calls purchased out in, I believe, August at the 11 strike. Watch that. Had a nice big winner today in Baba. Alibaba just blew out the upside by basically saying, hey, our revenue is going to grow at 44 to 45%. Where else do you get a company other than Alibaba with revenue growth like that? So this one exploding to the upside. When we talked about the unusual calls less than 30 days ago, these calls were trading for 40 cents. They went up 1,600%. So that's why you got to watch for unusual activity. That's what we do at Investitute. We're always looking around for opportunity where we can invest a small amount of money. Those calls, by the way, were trading for 40 cents at the 130 strike as the stock screams now up through 140s into the almost 150s. That's Alibaba. But you have a controlled amount of risk when you buy a call option. That's the way we like to trade. So if the stock moves 20% or 30%, woohoo! That's great if you're a stockholder. I almost never am. I'm almost always an owner of calls if I'm bullish, owner of puts if I'm bearish, and you have a defined amount of risk when you enter the trade. And then hopefully a great reward, a leveraged return on the investment you make. That's what we teach over at Investitute. I encourage you to check it out on our site right here. And remember, you can subscribe through iTunes or through YouTube to our channels. We put up video blogs or vlogs all the time along with our podcasts. I hope you have a great day. We'll see you soon.